I hope you're not suffering with a cold like me. It seems to be that time of year. Autumn is definitely upon us. This morning's session, I'm really excited about. For years now, I've been asked by clients and prospective clients about recommendations for HR systems, and also simply, what should I be using, where should I be going, and there's normally sort of a bit of a blank expression comes across my face. And we've recently linked up with a fantastic partner, Phase 3 Consulting, who are experts in vendor selection, implementation, integrations, all that kind of thing. So I'm really, really happy to invite them on today to educate me and all of us on the steps we should be going through when we're thinking about looking for a new HR system. Recruiting systems, I've got HR systems, it's a complete blur to me, so I'm excited for this morning's session. They have at Phase 3 a 12-step process around selecting and implementing HR systems. It's quite a lot to get through. So what we're going to do at the moment, or for this morning's session, is simply looking at the very basics and the initial steps of looking to, do I need a system? If so, where should I look? How should I go around selection, that kind of thing. So we're going to do all of that this morning. So with that in mind, I'm going to invite Emma and Louise on, and we'll take it from there. So just bear with me one moment. Let's find you, Emma. Okay, there you are. I'm going to invite you on screen now, Emma. And Louise, I'm going to do the same with you. Good morning, Emma.
Good morning.
How are you?
Oh, I'm a little bit dark. I'm good, thank you. You?
A little bit what?
A little bit dark.
Oh, that's right.
There we go.
Okay, hi Louise, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks, Giles. How are you?
I'm all right, full of a cold and a little bit hot actually, but hey, we're going to power through this. It's all right. And from what you told me, I think you guys can do most of the talking this morning anyway, so that's a good thing. So I can just sit back, drink coffee, and learn from you both. Before we get started, should we do some introductions? Perhaps Emma, you first.
Okay, so my name is Emma Perris, and I have been in the HR and payroll tech for more than 20 years now. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just going with more than 20. And I have to say, out of all the jobs I've ever had, this is the one that I bring home. I absolutely love, and my soapbox permanently is where I'm at.
Excellent.
So I'm Louise Johnston, and I am one of the custom success managers at Phase 3. My career started about 15 years ago in HR. So I can absolutely relate to all you HR folk out there. And I moved into HR technology about 6 years ago. And my role really is to bridge the gap between HR and tech, because I understand that it's not the easiest area to navigate. So I help our clients to do that.
Excellent. I think it always helps when you've been on the other side of the fence and you've been there as an end user and you understand it. I know at Jobtrain, we've got a lot of us here that have previously worked in recruitment roles. We've implemented systems. We've had some good experiences, some not good experiences, but I'm delighted to have you join me this morning. Thank you so much for your time. I first saw Louise, it was, we remember we used to do physical exhibitions in the good old days. You present the 12 steps of selecting and implementing HR software, and I was really captivated by your talk. So thank you for joining me this morning. I know we've got quite a lot to get through, so should we get right onto it? Yes. So first area is very much like the world of applicant tracking systems. I will quite often get calls from people that are currently using an ATS, perhaps are a bit frustrated with it. And normally my first question is, do you need to change it? Or do you need to dig in a little bit better and see if actually with a little bit of support or focus or reconfiguration, it might support you? So that is the first step we should take.
Okay, so I'll jump in if that's okay, Louise.
Yeah.
So the first, in the words of the Clash, do I stay or do I go? Right.
Love it.
That's what it's all about. Do I stay or do I go? And we have seen so many people go, we just need to go. We need to do it all over again. We need to feel that pain of months and months and months and spend thousands of pounds because this system is rubbish. the system often isn't. It really isn't. The first thing you need to do is just actually have a reality check. All the things that you did when you went into buying the system that you've got, revisit it. Revisit to see what the benefits were and what you actually wanted from the system, and have a reality check of, actually, did we do any of those things? One of the most expensive statements in business is, well, that's what we've always done. And if you continue to do that's what we've always done in the new system, inevitably it's not going to change.
Nothing changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you need to look at the drivers as well, don't you, Louise? You know, the drivers, the people maybe that you had in the team initially, they may have gone now because they were here for the short, quick, get it in, get it gone. But actually, do you have the in-house skills and things like that to be able to continue to do it?
This is it. And I think for me, one of the important things to remember is that, well, number one, the grass isn't always greener. And secondly, as difficult as it might be to hear, I don't believe there's such a thing as a perfect HR system. It's just very unlikely. Nothing in life is perfect, is it? So one of the first things that I often recommend to clients when they're thinking, should I stay or should I go, is to undergo a system health check or a system review, basically a benchmarking exercise, because exactly as Emma said, it might be that something's changed in your organisation that makes you think that you need a new system, or it might just be that you've got bogged down in where you are. And sometimes we see people getting quite a negative view of their HR system, but actually it can do what you want it to before you go forward to a huge implementation exercise. So it's very much worth benchmarking where you are to start with, and having that system review. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. So my advice before you make the decision, we absolutely need a new system, is to benchmark. And you can do that with your own supplier. So you might want to ring them and ask them about their views of the performance of your system, and asking them perhaps to do a system review for you, or look at their ideal setup, as in, if we were to do this again using our current system, how would we set it up now? Because that gives you an understanding again whether or not it meets your requirements. So you can do that with your current vendor, or you might want to start to benchmark against users of the same software that you currently use. You'd have to obviously at that point bear in mind that there's so many differences between organisations, between processes, but it's worth looking to see what other people are doing where you are already. And then after that, perhaps you might want to go out and compare the functionality of the system that you've already got to an alternative product. But certainly it's worth having a review before you actually make that jump to say, we want something different.
Yeah, I guess it is a really big change. Question for you is that obviously I understand the world of ATS really well, and in terms of that benchmarking, I think it's quite a healthy process to go through. Even if you're happy with the system that you've got, would you, in the world of HR software providers and payroll software providers, would you expect to be charged for that kind of benchmarking process, or can you quite reasonably ask for that to be just done? Same with perhaps a review or a health check of what you've got as well, because sometimes, and I might get killed for saying this, what I hear is that sometimes certain HR and payroll providers will simply charge for the smallest amount of consultancy and reconfiguration and stuff. Is there a way to navigate through that you might suggest?
Can I just jump in at that point? So the first thing I would do whenever you go through a project like this, always finish off with the lessons learned. And then when you come to this point, you can go back to that lessons learned internally and actually have a reality check and try to be honest, and do that. So in the first instance, internally, you can do this. You don't need anybody else. If you do decide to go externally, and with companies like Phase 3, we often do that to help clients, and Louise can probably chip in here when we talk about the health checks that Louise is talking about. Quite often, people will just say, look, we'll do you a health check and we'll give you some honest feedback, because sometimes I don't think clients can be as truly honest as they think they can be as constructive criticism about what they've done and how they've gone about things. Would you agree, Louise?
Absolutely. It's something, the benchmarking exercise is something that you can do yourself, absolutely, but it's good often to get that second opinion, I think, and asking either the vendor or a third party to give their ideas on where you are with your system as well.
I think that's great advice. You can get too close to your own system and your own setup and things sometimes, for sure. So let's imagine we've gone through that process and we've come to the realization that we probably need to make a change. The next step is probably going to be around creating some kind of a business case, I would think. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that business case, everybody will say to us, oh, you know, what do I need in my business case? Well, first things first, you need to look in and you need to see where you're at. Yeah, your maturity journey within the organization. You know, do you have lots of geographical locations that you need to take into place? Do you have very restricted budgets? You know, quite often we will see people say, oh, we want the moon on the stick, we want the Ferrari, but actually we've got 20 quid to spend. You know, we can't, reality, you can't do it. So understand where you are in that journey and the appetite for internal development as well. So if your system has failed to progress because you didn't have that engagement, you know, maybe look at doing things like that first of all. But there are certain things that you really should have in that business case. You know, productivity gains. What are you actually going to get from going through this? If all you're going to get is the same as, why are you spending the money? Yeah, it's ludicrous. The employee experience. The employee experience is not just about getting a payslip. I actually booked some train tickets the other day, and my experience of booking those train tickets was horrendous. Yeah, and I would imagine that whoever designed the system probably hasn't even thought about my experience, because if they had, it certainly wouldn't look like it does now. So look at all of the touch points and people that are involved in that area. Compatibility. Oh, exactly why we're doing this, Giles. It's compatibility between lots of different systems. Yeah. If you have nothing to link to, you can have anything you want, really. But if you've got 20 different systems you've got to talk to, you really need to do your homework. Yeah,
and I think we're all agreed that in many cases it is a best of breed approach that you probably might want to take. But there is sometimes some trepidation around that best of breed, because will my HR system, you know, talk to my ATS and play nicely with it or not? Critical to get that established up front. We've got lots and lots of clients that are very happy with the recruitment platform they've got. They just simply need to be able to simply transfer that new hire data over to an HR system. Can it be done? How is it done? How much is it going to cost me? And how complex is it?
Yeah, and of course, obviously, the cost savings is a massive thing, and this is always one that we I've always said in the job that I do, the minute I go into a new client, people hate me. I don't even have to have met them. They hate me because all they see is cost savings. I'm going to lose my job, right? The HR and payroll people are far more qualified than chasing a piece of paper around a building. And that's what they need to remember. Replacing that functionality is not about downgrading what they actually do as a job. Yeah. Louise, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important as part of the business case. Obviously, it is about savings here, but it's important to include the cost as well, because when you start to progress towards a new system, there's often going to be hidden costs, which we can talk about later in further sessions, but things like go live fees, added on consultancy fees at the end, things which are hidden often need to be included in the business case here as well. So when you're going obviously to the finance director and you're asking for money, it's about qualitative benefits that are going to justify that spend. So it's really important that you include all of that, and it's not about over egging the savings, because there is of course going to be an associated cost with the new system.
Yeah, I'll look forward
and be honest about the risks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll look forward to digging into some of those hidden costs and that kind of thing, because that's something that doesn't really exist so much within the ATS world, but I know does exist within the HR and payroll world. So that's good. So if we assume that we've put forward a business case, it's been approved in principle, the next stage is probably understanding exactly what we need in terms of our requirements. Is that right?
It certainly is. A massive part of any project is understanding what you need to actually achieve. Yeah, and that is doing the utmost in the requirements gathering. Put the legwork in, because that will help narrow down who you're going to use. And it will also, give you a good weighting to the requirements. So when you go into a vendor, and we'll talk about that in later sessions, but you've got a good idea of, right, I absolutely need it to do this. I'd love to do this, but not so important. And that is wow. Yeah. But quite often people are focusing on the wow, and they're not on the absolutely what we have to do. And one of the greatest pitfalls is just ignoring and assuming those manual processes. Understand your processes and give them a good weighting for what's essential and what's desirable.
Absolutely, because something that we come across quite often is what we call consultancy stalemate. So when you get to the stage, this is if you've not done your process mapping properly, sometimes you get to a point where it's, well, we want it to work and we want it to do this, but we've not mapped out all of our HR processes beforehand. So we as consultants sometimes say, what do you want the system to do? Well, what can it do? And you're at stalemate already. So before you even start to do this, we recommend process mapping. So it's your as is, and sometimes it is as simple as taking a couple of days out from the business and putting post-it notes all over the walls of exactly what you do in HR, how your processes work, and then changing those to what it could be. So we sort of move slightly in terms of project management. We're looking at cutting out any unnecessary printing exercises, things like that, bits of paper, handoff. How many times is something handed off before it gets to where it should be? So within that process mapping, you've got your as is, and then you're cutting out the unnecessary waste, and then looking at a to be process, and from there building the requirements from your new system into that. So you're sort of starting to marry the two together, because I believe that you'll often have to adapt your process slightly to meet your new system, but also you want your system to fit your new process, because exactly process mapping exercise, and you're not grounded exactly where you are as an HR function. When you start looking to vendors, you don't know properly what you want, and it all becomes a mishmash from there. So absolutely the first step is that process mapping. What do you want your system to do, and how is it going to fit that process?
And with the right people, isn't it?
Yeah,
get the right stakeholders in the room. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not just about the heads of department. You know, these people that are in the room really need to know the nitty gritty, and it's the basic of things. You know, each of the touch points within the employee life cycle, you know, you need to understand what those are, because otherwise they will become overlooked.
Yeah, that rings so true in terms of what we see when we're implementing Jobtrain as an ATS. In quite a lot of cases, people haven't actually, they're not even aware of exactly what the process looks like. So the idea about putting post-it notes out there or mapping it out in some way, whether that's workflows and things. And actually, you know, you take a broken process and bring it online and put it to a system, it's just an online broken process. So there's such a great opportunity to refine and improve and challenge yourself on what does good look like, or what should good look like. So yeah, that definitely rings true. So we've done all that bit. And I guess the next bit is probably the exciting bit of going out, finding vendors, and then arranging demos and shortlisting and that kind of thing. What's your advice around that? And I know that you have, obviously you help with vendor selection at Phase 3, but you also have a really nice online vendor selection tool as well that can help with that. A little bit of a plug there, but it is really cool.
With Phase 3 Connect, it's a really good system selection tool. And I think that is often a nice place to start, because choosing an HR system isn't something that we do too often in our HR careers. It might be that we want to benchmark our system, or we're thinking, is this actually right? Quite often, maybe sometimes every day, but actually taking the plunge into, right, we're going to look for a new vendor. That's something that doesn't happen very often. So the system selection tool is a great way to start, just to narrow it down. And they're quite simple questions about the size of your organization, the functionality that you want. Will it be mobile compatible? Will it have self-serve? Things like that will all be asked within there. And then the tool will bring you a shortlist of systems which might fit your needs. So that's a nice place to start, because otherwise, if you just do a Google search HR system, goodness knows what's going to come up.
Pretty overwhelming. Yeah,
exactly. So that's a good place. We also see quite often people asking on LinkedIn, what's a good HR system? Now, that's something that we would always proceed with caution. Like, there's nothing wrong with asking your colleagues or your peers, other people in the industry, what's a good system? But you've got to remember how different every organisation is. So it might be, we use this, it's such a basic and silly example, but by saying who can recommend a good HR system is the same as me saying to you guys, can you recommend a good car? Your requirements will be completely different. What you want from the car will be different from what I want from the car. It's very basic, but asking on LinkedIn, it's good to get a recommendation, but just proceed with caution in that way. It might be, if you're public sector, that you go through a tender process and through procurement, or another option is to ask HR tech consultants to gain an opinion on the industry, what systems they've used, their experiences. And another idea that we have, there's nice community within HR tech now, and a lot of different vendors run user groups, some as part of the vendor and some are independent. But they're sometimes a nice way to get involved with that user community, because, like I say, no system is perfect, but then by joining that community and attending a user group, you can get a real understanding of what it's like every day using that system. So that can be a nice way to start as well.
That's
and
great
it's that
advice.
Different views, isn't it, from people as well? So what we would say, Giles, is when you're doing your requirements gathering and you get the right people in the room for those requirements gathering, is use those people in the demos as well, to listen to what the vendor's saying, because they will hear things differently, as I think we're all discovering with the whole lockdown, and we're experiencing our minds a little bit differently now. People will hear things differently, people have different priorities, and they will ask different questions in different ways, and that can be very insightful on that response. You've got to remember that these sales demos are planned, they are scripted to a degree, and I'm not giving anything away.
And exactly how
you
they
see the best. And don't be frightened to say, I can't see where I can see somebody's gender, right? To the people in the HR and payroll world, we may make assumptions. Do not make assumptions.
I love
Do
that.
not.
I love that. It sounds all too familiar, and I guess sometimes all that glitters is not necessarily gold as well. You got to stick to what were my original requirements, what are my objectives, and stick to that rather than necessarily getting waylaid or diverted by something that just looks super cool.
Have your own script. They come with a script to sell. Have your own script to question, to make sure you get all your questions in.
Often, sorry, I say it would be a problem getting us, we'll get so excited by all of this, but an important thing as well is helping the salespeople to help you, because sometimes it can be that they get grilled because you are aware that you're seeing a demo, so then you end up really grilling the sales pitch. Don't make it too much of a tough test. You could offer them information about your organisation and the functionality that you want ahead of time, so that you can steer the demo in the direction that you want, so you can really see how it will work in real life at your organisation. And sometimes we call it writing a story. So it will be an example of something that's exactly happened at your organisation, and then asking from that demo for them to show you just how that would work on the system.
I agree massively, and I think sometimes it's a little bit of an acid test as well when you supply or furnish a vendor with lots of information ahead of the demo. If they listen to absorb and do the necessary prep and show you what you've asked to see versus what they want you to see, then that will probably give you some sense of what they're going to be like to work with as well. They just stick or drag you through a standard demo of their products and just showing you what they want you to see, then I would suggest there might be some alarm bells ringing in there. I've certainly seen that within the ATS world as well. And sometimes when we've got brownie points, it has been that you really read through and understood our requirements and you responded to it, you tailored the demo. I think that's something quite key to look out for. There is an awful lot of choice out there, and it's quite difficult, when you start your search for a new vendor, risks and costs and that kind of thing. What would you say to that?
In terms of,
well, you talked through the selection tool and that kind of thing. Does that help you with things like understanding costs, and how do you go about calculating costs and that kind of thing? And also hidden costs. I know that's something we might come on to in a later session, but
sure.
What are the key things we should be looking out for?
I think absolutely asking the vendor up front. So it's looking at things like license fees. How do they work? Are there anything? I mentioned earlier about sometimes there's added consultancy fees. So we touched on that too, that potentially, there are some vendors out there where to do anything, there will be an added on consultancy.
Yeah.
So it's understanding when you go through an implementation project like this, it's not just the one-off cost. There's going to be the cost to carry on using the product thereafter. Some vendors charge for upgrades and such. Some vendors will charge, for any extra consultancy that moved away from your initial requirements. So that again is a really important factor to make sure that you've got your requirements and that the vendor understands when it comes to implementation exactly what they're trying to build, just so you don't get stung by the hidden costs in that part of your contract.
Yeah, I guess.
And your maturity.
Yeah, go ahead, Emma. Sorry, no, go for it.
Your maturity as well of the organisation matters. So, for example, when you go into an implementation, they may say to you, right, we can do this inside of 3 months. We'll give you 60 days consultancy. Everybody goes, oh, great, I'll be live in 3 months. Reality check. Add another 6 months to that, okay? Because you have a day job to do. Your consultant that you're paying for might be able to do it in 60 days. But in that time, you've got to review your processes. You've got to review what you're going to change, agree what you're going to change, communicate out to the organisation if you're going to change any T's and C's or anything like that. You've got to do the J job. You've got to do all this requirements gathering. So that in itself can take a long period of time. And I don't want to be doom and gloom about this because it's the most important part of the process. So don't be fooled into thinking 60 days is 60 days. That 60 days is if they do the bare minimum and you do the rest. So you can double, triple the number of days effort you've got to put in. And that is a cost that is hidden, isn't it, Louise? Very much hidden.
We see it a lot.
Would you both say that talking to recent customers that have gone through the implementation process for a given vendor is a good idea, because they'll be able to give you a true story and picture of how long did it take? Was that allocated consultancy enough for the implementation? Were there costs? Where did they come in? That kind of thing.
I would definitely. And the other thing that I would recommend that people do is have consistent consultancy.
Yeah.
And have an internal consistent project team, because that is another hidden cost that people don't realize. So I will go into site. I will learn all about the people, learn about how they work, which is a massive part of implementation, and learn about the business and the organization. I will then go after 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, and then somebody else will come in behind me. They've got to learn that all over again. So having a consistent consultant means that when you make a decision here, they are looking to the future as to what you want to achieve. And they're able then to plan backwards in the order in which, when you build a house, you don't put the plug sockets in first. Okay. You put the walls in, you design where the plug sockets are going to go at the beginning, but you don't put them in first. And think about it like that. It is a process, but you need to keep an eye on what the end goal is to get the beginning right. And I would say having just a HR project member and just a payroll and never two meeting is a bad thing personally, because they don't understand the impact on one another.
Really, really good advice. Any other sort of final advice around mistakes you see people make when they're going through vendor selection? Right, smile there, Louise, I can see it.
I know, it always seems awful to talk about mistakes or the bad things, but actually it's something that we really can learn from, because it's understood that around about 70% of HR tech projects are deemed as unsuccessful, which I think is really
wow.
I know, and that could be for various different reasons, but that is because potential mistakes have been made from the start. So I think one of the first ones is absolutely not going through the process properly and fully. So not understanding necessarily that you're looking for a new system because you're looking for a change. You're looking for something to be better and potentially to streamline those processes. Now, something we see so often is that clients rush through implementation and they end up replicating the old system into the new system. So then you've not achieved any of the benefits of your new system. You've gone out, you've had your demos, you want something new and better. But if you're replicating the old system in the new one, you're not achieving what you set out to do. So
all you've done is spend money.
Exactly. So we see that often, replicating the old system in the new system. And I think the second one, I keep saying, is rushing through the process. It's exactly as Emma said just now, we'll be live in 60 days. And we hear clients come to us, we want a new system and we want to go live within 3 to 6 months. I think that's unlikely. I would always recommend looking at about 12 to 18 months from start to finish. I know it's long. You can do it quicker, but I believe that rushing this sort of process and not understanding the implications of the decisions you make now, what's going to happen in the future, that's what leads to this understanding that projects go wrong. So absolutely don't rush the process.
On that rushing the process, Louise, you may have unions involved. Believe it or not, unions are still out there. If you're public sector, there's so many things that actually hoops you have to jump through. Yeah, red tape that you've got to cut through before you can actually start making any changes. And you need to put that in. That is part of that project timeline.
Absolutely. You've got to be realistic. And I just think that rushing through this process, it will only end in things going wrong, because ultimately, I think as well, when you're buying new HR technology, you're not just buying it for HR anymore. You're buying it for the organisation as a whole. So if you haven't sorted yourselves out in HR or payroll, by the time you get to the point of, releasing the information to your employees, ready to book their own annual leave and such, it's so simple, but things like the entitlements are all wrong because you've skipped through and you've rushed, then it's basically you look daft, don't you, in front of
turning a blind eye to things, manual processes. That fits right in there, Louise, as one of my bugbears, Giles, for things are going wrong. And single point of reliance. Every time you see it, that's my guru. Then they leave. There's a hit for you because you've got to replace that person, and all that knowledge has just walked out the door.
That's a brilliant point. I've seen that happen quite a few times before, and it causes you issues as a user, but it also causes a lot of issues for the vendor as well. So yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great point to end on, conscious of time, but it's been ace. Thank you both so much. I'd love to get you back on for another section, and we'll go into perhaps contract negotiation and then the start of requirements gathering and all that kind of stuff. But it's been so helpful. I've learned so much from it. So thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you to everybody else for joining this session. Next week, completely different topic. I'm really, really happy. We've got Kate Hargreaves, who's the founder and managing director of Mosaic Partners, joining us, and we're going to talk about psychological safety. It's been one hell of a year for us all. So we're going to look at remote leadership. What is psychological safety? How do we look after the well-being of our teams? And how do we support them? And how do we identify if they have specific needs and requirements and stuff? So it should be a really good session. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a super week, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.